It's so nice to see everyone again virtually, especially Garth from Frederick, Maryland. You're on season 3 of Music and Chat with Shirley Ong, and it's a good morning from me to you in Singapore, where I am for season 3. Please say hi in the live chat and let us know where you're tuning in from, and don't be backward and coming forward. And remember to put any questions you may have in the same live chat right here, so that I may attend to them as the stream moves along. Please subscribe if you haven't already, if you enjoyed this broadcast. Thank you. So where's everyone today? What's everyone doing today? How about Gary? It is your nighttime in Maryland. How was your day? It's a cloudy day for me here in Singapore. I'm pausing a bit because there's a 30 to 90 second lag from when I broadcast and when you receive the broadcast. So don't be shy, don't be concerned. It's just par for the course. Hey, Doug! Doug Yulin, hi, nice to see you this morning. How are you doing? Oh, I should say this evening. Doug, great to see you. Finally, our other party goer, Mike Flavin. Hey, Mike. Hello to you too. How's your day been? Mine has been slightly overcast, as you can see, even though it's still morning. Oh, the sun hurt me. I'm suddenly a little brighter by 5 lumens. Anyway, it's great to see you all today. And it's 9:33 here a.m. that I've got in Singapore. So let's get on with the stream. If you see other guests pop in, other viewing guests pop in, please say hello to them as well for me. So our guest today has been a musician, music electronics designer, author, magazine editor, producer. He has been everything. And he designed for some of the top music equipment manufacturers and even contributed to most of the trade magazines we read. Or have read. Some of them are no more, unfortunately. It is no wonder he is sought after to advise on the future of the music industry. But before I bring our guest in, I want to say hello to Brian from Raleigh. Hey, Brian, nice to see you. I thought I was late starting the live stream, but I guess I was just in time or on time. And also, before I bring our guest in to perform a piece for you, it's Escape on synthesizer that I wrote for synthesizer and some extended synth stuff. And it's available on my third and fourth album, actually. It was first released on my third album, but when I released my fourth album in Nashville, I included some of my old stuff for my new friends. Okie dokie, let's do it. So I'm gonna just tilt my laptop camera a bit because I'll be playing using the laptop camera for a change instead of the Theremin camera. So here we go. So here's Escape. So that was Escape. And I wrote Escape during a time when I wanted to escape. Well, you know, sometimes when things get a little boring and there must be more exciting things out there. You just want to get away from it. Thanks, Doug. Slappin' tune, he said. Oh, thanks, Gary. Yeah, usually when I play a song live, I kind of get to play around with it a bit instead of replicate precisely what you hear on the CD. I noted someone new in the live stream. Pat from Chicago. I think that's what you're written. Pat from Chicago. Hey, Pat, nice to meet you. And my good and dear friend, Tony from Castlemaine, Australia. Hi, Tony. I hope you're well. Miss you. Been wanting to visit my friend Tony in Castlemaine, Australia, but as it is, with COVID travel restrictions and all, I have not been able to really travel far and wide. But it's great to see my friend Tony. Alrighty, so let's do this. Let's welcome in Craig Anderton. So let me turn on my guest Skype screen and let's call Craig on Skype. On my guest Skype.
Hey there.
Hey, Craig.
How are you?
I'm good. It looks like the Skype monster has been replacing a background again.
See, it does that. I don't know why it does that.
Yeah, it's a Skype monster.
I don't even want it. Okay, there's the real me.
You don't want it, but you're gonna have it.
I wonder if there's a save as default or something. Let's see.
You should be able to.
Choose background effect. Okay, 3 dots. No, I don't want more. Okay, no, it doesn't let me. Probably time to reinstall it when all else fails, right?
No worries. But I'm glad you are to be found in your room. I do love that blue color you have on the walls. It's kind of a bluish green.
Yeah, and the lighting's blue when I'm not doing a Skype call. And very relaxing.
I'm sure. I should have some of those lights in my room. But anyway, welcome, Craig, and it's so nice to have you on Music and Chat. And what an interesting adventure of a life you've led. I'd like to pick a few moments of interest, if that's okay with you, to chat about. And we've got a nice bunch of folk in the viewing audience already. We've got, you know, our friends from the States as well as friends in Australia who have tuned in. So we should have a rowdy bunch of party goers with the live chat. So let's begin.
Yeah, rowdy is good. It's Saturday night, you know?
Well, there you go. It's Saturday night where you're at Sunday morning for me and Australia. Which is, I think, Tony, if I'm not wrong, are you 2 hours ahead of Singapore? Let us know in the live chat. So, Greg, guitarist, you're a guitarist and sita player with the band Mandrake Memorial, and they were playing between 67 and 1970, as far as I know. And the band began life at the peak of psychedelic rock in a Philadelphia club.
You got that right.
Tell us a bit about the band, about this scene.
Well, I also played synthesizer, actually, back in those days. I made my own because I couldn't afford a Moog Series 3 and put it on stage, you know. So anyway, so it was, guitar, sitar, and synthesizers.
I see.
So it was fun. But yeah, it was a very different time. You know, I mean, it was a very different time. for one thing, you could have local music scenes and support yourself very well. You know, you could be like one of the hot bands in Boston or one of the hot bands in Chicago or Philadelphia or whatever, and you could play that area, and then you could play other places. I mean, we went up and down the East Coast. We did most of the Midwest. We went over to England at one point, you know. So I mean, we played a lot, but it was like, it was a situation where you didn't have all media instantly available all the time. So if you wanted to hear music, live music was, you know, like a very common thing. People would go out and go to concerts. And the other thing is that it was a very, you know, to put it in historical context, I mean, anybody who's younger than 70 doesn't know what a world war does to a planet. But the context of it was afterward. It was, you know, the 50s was basically everybody coming out of shock from having, you know, the World War, and everybody was looking for some kind of stability and you know, like some, and of course there was the threat of nuclear weapons and duck and cover in the schools and all that. So when the 60s happened, and then Kennedy was assassinated and all this, you know, and Martin Luther King and then Bobby Kennedy, and it was not a real good time. So when the Beatles came in and they were like positive and a little bit iconoclastic and somewhat naughty around the edges, but nothing you wouldn't want your mother to meet or whatever, they were in the right place at the right time with the right music, the right producer, and they had honed their act live for months, yeah, maybe years, I don't know. And back in those days, the whole point was live playing. So the object of going into a studio was to try to capture the magic of playing live. And somewhere between then and now, it's flipped 180 degrees, and now the object of playing live is to reproduce what you created in the studio. You know, so it's a very different thing. So live music was at a premium. The other thing is that it was a very adventurous time on many levels. So I mean, you could go to a concert and you'd have, like, you know, Tom Rush or you know, Joni Mitchell open up for Humble Pie with Miles Davis as the headliner. I mean, it was just, people did not place very many constraints on musical taste. There was a lot of variety. And so we didn't have algorithms telling you what you should listen to, you know, or if you listen to Led Zeppelin, it tells you should listen to, you know, Greta Van Fleet, you know. It doesn't tell you, oh, you like Led Zeppelin, maybe you should listen to Beethoven. You know, he's big and loud. So, you know, so it was just a very different scene, but boy, it was great. We played 6 nights a week for 6 weeks. And at a club, or 5 nights, 6 nights a week for 6 weeks, or 5 nights. It depended upon the week. And then we would get other people to come in when we were playing somewhere else. Like we played a lot in Boston, we played a lot in New York. We played every place there was to play in New York. So it was that hones your skills pretty fast.
It's interesting you brought up the fact that we didn't have aggregators like Spotify or iTunes or some of the other platforms, which kind of a popular word that is being thrown around these days is curation. It sounds very noble, but it's precisely what you just explained. You know, some algorithm is choosing your music for you.
Now, some people have said to me, no, Craig, you've got it wrong, because it's a really good algorithm. You know, like I find, you know, I'm really into, you know, name a genre of music, and it finds all these different bands in that genre of music. But is it going to get you finding out other things that you never even knew existed? I mean, like, I spent a lot of time in Europe, and whenever I was in Europe, I would go into stores and just check out sort of random CDs and see what I could find. Well, at one period, there were a lot of expatriates from the Caribbean and Africa in Paris. And there was this great synthesis of like African music and French studios and synthesizers and all that. And it was great. And so I started following that, and that led me to the Caribbean, and that led me to zouk and soca and, you know, other types of things. And, you know, there's so many times when I play music for people that I like, they're like, where'd you find that? You know? And there's so much. I think that at some point, if artificial intelligence and machine learning can progress to a point where it sees connections beyond the obvious, like it might say, okay, you like stuff that's 130 beats per minute, and you like it to have guitars, and, you know, you like vocals and, you know, or whatever, and it might choose from a wider array of musical choices.
I
But if you look at
understand.
all media these days, really, it's all about siloing people into a specific demographic, because the ability acquiring people to your thing. I mean, how are you going to get to like 200,000 subscribers? It's not easy, right?
Yeah.
So the thing is, it's so hard to acquire people. They want to hold on to who they have. So they give people what they're used to getting, whether it's the news, or whether it's the movies, or whether it's, the 14th installment of a Marvel comic series that just goes on forever, And it's, it's not Fellini, that's for sure.
Those are good thoughts, Craig. I'm sure there'll be some questions from the viewers about those thoughts. But before we move on, I'd like to show a clip of a video from, I think it could be a 67 Mandrake Memorial live gig. Correct me if I'm wrong. You probably will see it on your iPhone or Android phone in a few seconds. I'll just play it for all to check out.
I'm amazed it still exists.
Do you see the video, Craig?
Yeah, that was like really early. That was a rehearsal.
Oh, it was
Really
a
early on.
rehearsal?
Yeah, that was a rehearsal. I think
Well, I
really
found it
early
on YouTube, so
The vast repository of weird things.
it was an interesting piece, I must say. But I was reminded that psychedelic rock was basically characterized by, sounds that were steeped in effects like delay and reverb and phasing, all the things that we still use, but used with a lot of joy and and in abundance.
Well, when I started, like, when EDM started really happening and techno really happened, and I started playing over in Germany, like at the turn of the century, in the late, in the 1998, 99, 2000, up to about 2005. And it was like I was back home, it was all effects and light shows and phasing and strange things. But I had a real advantage because I was playing guitar.
Yeah.
And I was playing to people a third my age, so they'd never heard of Jimi Hendrix and feedback guitar and things like that. So when I did things like feedback guitar, they were like, "Oh, wow,"
Well, you're cool.
So
We want you in the band.
yeah, I was like, "Oh, look at that old guy playing guitar, man! I've never seen that before," kind of thing.
Ageism.
Yeah.
What
But
old guy?
No, but it was really great. I really felt like I could be experimental again.
Yeah. That's
and
interesting. Yeah.
I mean, a lot of rock musicians, they were like, "Well, what are you doing, DJing and stuff like that? Isn't that just people pushing buttons?" I'm like, no, it's not just people pushing buttons. They say, you try to keep 4,000 Germans whacked out on ecstasy, happy for 4 hours when you start playing at 3 a.m, and you can't make one mistake. You cannot make one mistake. You cannot have one transition that goes wrong, and then tell me that it's not hard to do,
Interesting. Yeah, the DJ was definitely born from the EDM movement, wasn't it? And speaking of birth, it seems that you started building pedal and synths at around that same time as well when you were playing with Mandrake Memorial. Is that correct?
Actually, it was before that.
Before that? Wow.
Yeah, before that. Yeah, the first article that was ever published was in Popular Electronics in 1966, and was how to build a fuzz tone.
Nice.
And then I did how to build a compressor. And it used a mic. It basically used a CB mic preamp automatic gain control, and I modified it to become a guitar compressor. I came up with a phase shifter in 1970, And my
Wow.
dad was in the aviation business, and he set up I said, I've got these really great effects. He said, well, I know people at Command who had just bought Ovation. He said, I'll introduce you
Oh.
to them, and you can play them these things and see if they're interested. So I played them the compressor, and I played them the phaser, and they listened politely. And then they looked at me and they said, who would ever want to sound like that? So they could have had the first compressor and phase shifter.
There you go.
But anyway.
Well, how
And then
times have changed and attitudes as well. Sorry, go on.
Well, and the synthesizer thing was interesting too, because I mean, basically all of these came about because they didn't have the money to buy things, you know. So like,
Yeah.
when people would put their TVs out on trash day, I would go out with the wire cutters and I'd like take out all the decent capacitors and inductors and things like
Oh.
that. So I made filters for my guitar using TV inductors and various
Wow.
parts. So and then the synthesizer had a push button keyboard. So
Oh.
it was like, it was not the height of expressiveness, shall we say, but it was still cool.
Wow, that's so interesting. Well, it seems that in researching the history of pedals, Reverb, the online vintage musical instrument marketplace, they discovered, you might know this already, but our viewers might not, Reverb discovered that half the companies they spoke to about the history of pedals had gotten started with your 1975 publication, Electronic Projects for Musicians. And I do have a picture of that magazine, so I'm going to display it now. So 1 second, here we go, folks. Oh, there we are.
Let's see if it's the first edition.
Yeah,
or the
I know.
second
It
edition.
looks too colorful to be the first edition, to be a 75 edition, but that's the one that I found. And I'm sure you can.
They're all the same thing. No,
Yeah.
no, the revised version was different. It had some more circuits in it. Let's see. Oh, it's coming up on your YouTube thing here now. No, it's not. Yeah, there we go. Oh, yeah, that's the second.
Second edition. So everyone, if you're curious, there's a bit of interesting experimentation for you. I guess you don't necessarily have to be a musician to want to play with electronic projects, right? But it's aimed at musicians.
Well, here, okay, so you might find it interesting how that book came about.
Yes, please
Because-
tell us.
And this is going to be interesting for anybody who's listening because it will give you hope.
Okay.
What had happened was I had done a lot of writing for Popular Electronics, and this was back when magazines paid real money. So like in 1967, you could get like $1,000 for an article, which in today's money would be like, $4,000 or something. So I had this really lucrative thing writing for Popular Electronics.
Right.
And then their editor, who was a great guy, unfortunately, he was killed in a car crash. And they got a new editor in, and he didn't want my kind of stuff anymore. He's like, no, we don't want that. So there I was without, it's like, okay, who do I do now? So I looked around at magazine stands, and I saw that there was this magazine called Guitar Player. I thought, okay. So I wrote to Guitar Player and I said, hey, how would you like remember, we didn't have email back in those days. So I wrote them a letter and said, how would you like an article on a headphone amp? It's like really easy to build and it's inexpensive and you don't, disturb your neighbors and stuff like that. And they were like, no, we don't want anything like that because we don't want to get sued, And I'm like, well, no, it's like not dangerous. It's battery powered. And they said, well, yeah, but apparently they had done an amp modification article and it caused problems. So they were like, no, we don't want to do it. And I said, look, you should really, So I kept kind of pestering them. And they finally went to Alembic guitar company that knew electronics. And they said, is anybody going to blow themselves up if they build this? And they said, oh, no, it's fine. So they accepted the article. And I said, oh, that's great. I said, well, let me give you the schematic. And they said, well, no, we do our own artwork here. It needs to be our look. And I said, well, it's a schematic, like you kind of can't, you can't kind of like make a mistake. And they're like, oh, no, we'll get it perfect. It'll be fine. So the article comes out and there's a mistake in the schematic and it can't work. So that was the best thing that ever happened in my life because they got over 300 letters from people who had either tried to build it and it didn't work, or pointed out that there was an error in the schematic, or I'm the audio specialist at National Semiconductor and I actually designed that chip and pin 2 should not go to ground, or whatever. So at that point they decided, okay, this is something happening. So then I did another one. I did a treble booster and they said, can you do a book? And I'm like, like I said, I was kind of desperate. I said, yeah, I can do a book, sure. So like about a month later, they called me and said, well, how's the book coming along? And I hadn't done anything. I mean, I'd never written a book before, you know. So I said, oh, you know, it's yeah, well. And they said, well, can you send us an outline? And I'm like, that's how they do it. You do an outline, and then you fill in the outline, and then you have a book. So then the model that I used for the book was, there was a book called How to Keep Your Volkswagen, The Complete Idiot's Guide, How to Keep Your Volkswagen Alive.
Oh.
And I had a 1966 Volkswagen, and I didn't know anything about cars. I mean, nothing about cars. I knew they had tires, they rolled, and you put gas in them. But this book taught you how to do basic stuff, how to adjust the carburetor and the points and change the spark plugs and do all that stuff.
Yeah.
And the way the book was laid out enabled me to work with cars. So I thought, well, if this can help me work with cars, maybe if I follow a similar format, I can show people how to work with electronics. So there was a definite format. You explain the terms first. This is what a resistor is. Then you explain the tools that you use. Then you explain the procedure you use with the tools. Then you give the projects and you tell them how to troubleshoot it if it goes wrong. So basically, I used that book as the prototype for electronic projects. And that went over really well. I mean, that went over really well. And then I did home recording for musicians, and that had George Martin do the foreword, which was a real coup.
Oh, nice.
And,
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like we were pals or anything. It's just like, I didn't know any better. I didn't know you couldn't ask people things, you know?
So how did you find him to write your foreword then? Did you approach him, or did the publisher?
The publisher said, hey, you know, we have this book coming out. You want to write a foreword?
Oh, okay.
and he said, well, let me look at, then he wrote me and he said, well, send me some chapters. So I sent him some chapters, and he, you know, I don't want to sound immodest here, but he really liked what I wrote. He really liked my attitude. So he wrote this beautiful, beautiful foreword about recording. And it was just like, I mean, it was just great. It was just this fantastic foreword. And Joe Walsh actually wrote the foreword for Electronic Projects for Musicians. He's a solderhead. And Howard Leese, he's a solderhead, and Randy Bachman. I mean, all these people build stuff. Greaves Gabriels, you know, I run into them and we talk about, you know, 60-40 rosin core solder. So it's like,
I'm proud to say I've built my own cables.
Yeah. That's good. That's good.
And some other things, but I'll get to that in a second. I want to say that our friend Tony Fowler from Castlemaine, Australia, he's also a self-professed tinkerer, and he said, I must have lost my copy of your Electronic Projects for Musicians book. But Tony used to work in the late 60s with EMS London as well.
Oh,
so
wow.
The fact that he had one of your books, that means something.
That's cool. Well, actually, you know, one of the founders of DigiDesign, which ended up being, you know, the people who did Pro Tools, got started with Electronic Projects for Musicians too. So anyway, yeah, it's out there. I mean, it's really out there.
So a few more questions. It seems that you also designed musical instruments that was sold through PAIA. Every one of us here in the viewing audience knows PAIA. It was founded by John Simonton. Simonton?
Yeah.
Thank you. We all pronounce words differently across the world, so thanks for the correction. Simonton, were you a partner of PAIA or a contributor, or did you hold a different position?
No, I was... John, first of all, John was a great guy. John was just a really cool person. And he loved building musical stuff. He wasn't really much of a musician himself, but he just loved doing music things. Right. And when Electronic Projects for Musicians came out, there was an electronics company that did kits for it, and then PAIA took them over. But I did several designs that PAIA did. I did the Quadra Fuzz, the Hot Springs reverb, a few other things with PAIA. And so I just ended up working with him a lot. After John died, I really kind of that was kind of a shock, and I just, you know, I let that lie fallow, shall we say. And I really don't do much building these days. I do all my experimentation in software. You know, it's such a fertile field. I don't write code, but I can put things together the same way I used to put together things with, you know, resistors and capacitors. Now I'm going to get a lab back together again at some point. Good. I got some ideas for things I want to do. Wonderful. But right now, well, like for example, the Quadra Fuzz that I did, that was a impossible thing to put together. An analog circuit that split things into 4 bands and distorted them and had a speaker emulator at the output. You know, and this was back in the early 80s. So to have a speaker emulator, you know, was like a weird thing. Wow. And, you know, actually there's an interesting story there too, because I just knew, okay, cabinet response falls off above 5 kHz, I'll put a 5 kHz low pass filter in there. Well, it sounded horrible. It didn't sound right. But I had a thing called the Op Amp Cookbook, or Filter Cookbook, and it told you how to avoid ripple and phase shifts and passband problems and all that. So I took the filter and I reworked it to do everything wrong. And then it sounded right. Then it sounded like an actual speaker. But the quadrant fuzz, it was really hard. It was really hard to do. It was like a house of cards. You got one resistor wrong and screw it up. But now I can just use a frequency splitter module in Studio One and feed 4 different amplifiers and amp sims. And I make my own cabinets now out of filters instead of like, capacitors and stuff. So it's the same thing. And as a matter of fact, the new books that I've done they're different topics, but they're the same philosophy as electronic projects for musicians. They're designed to show people how to do stuff so they can do fun things and have a good time,
Wonderful. So we have our good friend Tony piping up. Tony, I mentioned to you from Australia, who worked with EMS. He's saying that we still teach kids to build circuits here in Castlemaine schools. Sometimes music projects and sometimes ham radio gear.
I was WB2JQC. I was on ham radio.
There you go, Tony.
Brother from another mother.
Yeah, I considered going into ham radio, but I don't think I have extra hours to study and pass to get a certificate and then spend extra time I don't have on the ham radio itself. So maybe I'll wait till I retire if that ever happens.
We have the internet now.
Oh, well, I suppose. But it's kind of fun, right, to play with the gear. Instead of staring at your laptop constantly, I like to fiddle with other things.
Well, ham radio, it was, of course, it was all tube stuff. And, you had receivers and huge vernier dials and things like that. And the most exciting thing, I think, about ham radio was that you could just, start calling CQ at night and see who shows up. And it might be somebody in Berlin, or it might be somebody in Samoa or Africa. You just didn't know who you're going to end up talking to.
Well, I guess some of our viewers have come from Russia and France as well, so you don't know if they're lurking around somewhere. But hi, France, and hi, Russia.
Yeah, Russia's a hotbed of EDM and cool synthesizers and things, and the French electronic music scene is really something. So.
Absolutely. So I want to say hi to one of our viewers who's just popped in. Well, he popped in a few minutes ago, but I didn't get to say hello. Marcus Barnfield. Hi, Marcus. Where are you tuning in from? Let us know, please. Thank you. So I have a few pictures, Craig, to show of some of your designs. We have this one that you provided me. It's effects modules.
Oh yeah, that was the vector pack from the second edition of Electronic Projects for Musicians.
Ah, thank you.
Kind of like 500 series modules, same kind of idea.
Oh right, thank you. And then there's Funk Machine.
Yeah, that was an effect that it was a pedal. I designed several pedals for a company called Sea Moon in Berkeley.
All right.
And the Funk Machine, Larry Graham used it, Steve Cropper used it, Martha Davis used it, a bunch of people used it. So it was, it did reasonably well for the time.
All right. And then, of course, we have a couple of synthesizers that you built through PAIA with John. The first programmable electronic drum machine.
Oh, that was all John. I had nothing to do with that, really.
Was all John?
Yeah.
You acknowledged somewhere on the internet as having co-designed it with him.
No, I don't think. No, not the drum machine. What did I do? Maybe I did do something on the drum machine, actually. It was a long time ago.
And then.
But he did all the. Let's put it this way: he did all the hard work.
Okay. So you just looked over his shoulder and say, "Not that one, that one."
I may have helped with some of the sounds or something. It was a loose partnership,
Got it.
Sent stuff back and forth. The Peter Gabriel ended up using that. That was one of the inspirations for one of his albums, because Larry Fast was Gabriel's keyboard player, and Larry Fast used to come watch Mandrake, so I knew Larry from then, and he was a big PAIA fan, and he built a programmable drum machine and gave it to Peter Gabriel, and Gabriel got fascinated with it. So.
Oh, well, Oh, there you go. And I have a picture of the synthesizer, quote unquote. It's called the first computer-controlled synthesizer. That's what I got off the
The
internet as well.
8700. The 8700.
P4700J, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that was really cool. I think he used like a 6800 processor. I think it was something like that. Yeah. And it really, really was.
So I have someone from the viewing audience who thinks that whoever suggested that you co-design the electronic drum machine, the one with the picture display, these people might be thinking of the Matrix drums.
Probably. Oh, yeah. Actually, the Matrix drums was, yeah, that's it. It was actually the first programmable drum machine. But the caveat is that it was mechanically programmable. It used switches. It didn't have EEPROMs or a microprocessor or anything like that. It had pulse trains you could bring in and out with switches. And it was used in a group called Anomaly, which played in Philadelphia in like 71, 72, somewhere around there, 71 mostly, and was used on some of Linda Cohen's albums. But it was an actual programmable drum, but it wasn't programmable in the sense that John's was. I mean, John's was like a real microprocessor controlled thing with memory, you know?
Okay. Oh, wow. How enlightening. So do you think as a culture we have become less interested in DIY? I know there are pockets of people such as me and our friends who are interested in building your own kind of kits, but how about the rest of the world? Do you think we have succumbed to buy off the shelf rather than build your own?
Have you ever seen the movie Idiocracy?
No, I have not.
Someone here will know what I'm talking about.
Okay.
But or De-Evolution with Devo. But I think the thing is, I've noticed a couple things. One is I've been doing workshops and seminars since the mid-'70s. And people used to come to seminars and they'd be very interactive and they'd have questions and, you know, they'd really want to like talk about stuff. And then it became kind of sort of tapered off. And then Canada and Europe still did it. You know, you could go to Canada and have like really good seminars, or you could go to Europe and have really interesting seminars. And then those started to drift off because the seminars ended up people coming in basically saying, okay, I'm here, pour knowledge into my mouth so I can go home and make a hit single, you know? And it was like, it was very much like, and I'm on this big crusade now where I look at all these millions of videos on YouTube, and first of all, you know, well, I won't say anything, but they all address the question, how do I? How do I make my master sound loud? How do I make my drums sound big? How do I get a mini Moog bass sound? And I think the questions people should be asking is, what if I?
Yeah.
What if I transpose clavinet down 2 octaves and turn it into a bass? What if I take a cymbal and layer it with another cymbal and tune them both down and create a gong? And what happens if I use drums to trigger a vocoder that's being driven by a guitar mixed with a pad? I mean, you know, that's what happened during the 60s. You know, Pink Floyd, you know, when people listen to those classic albums, which people still listen to today, I mean, they still listen to the first Led Zeppelin album, they still listen to the Beatles, they still listen to Pink Floyd, because all those engineers were all asking, what if?
Yeah.
You know, George Martin didn't say, oh, how do I integrate strings with a bunch of people from clubs in Hamburg? I'll just ask the internet, you know? He was a, what if I added strings to this? What about if I put a French horn in the beginning, you know, or what if I try this? So I see a definite lack of experimentation. There's a very interesting study that was done in Spain, Barcelona. I forget what the name of it's a university of something in Barcelona. They analyzed 250 gigabytes of music going back to 1955. And they came to the conclusion that over the years, that chord variations had become less interesting, melodic progressions had become less interesting, recording technique, sounds were much more homogeneous, mastering techniques were the same. And it just basically, you know, and I mean, I take a little bit of a different standpoint. My feeling is that music has become inbred. Every time you reach for a mini Moog bass sound, you are contributing to making music inbred. You know, instead of thinking of a different bass sound you could come up with. I was just writing an article before you called. It's 5 reverb techniques. None of them involve using it traditionally. Like on one of them, it puts two reverbs in parallel out of phase so that they cancel. But
Ah.
one of them has a longer decay time.
Ooh.
So when the reverb starts off, it cancels, you don't hear anything, and then the reverb kind of comes
Ooh.
up from nowhere and blooms, and then it dissipates.
I like
And
that.
it's a great sound, but it all came about because I was trying to do something else. I said, well, what if I put these things out of phase? Oh, this is interesting,
Well,
So,
you're an experimenter. That's how I would call you or label you, rather than all the other ones that you're known by or known for to be.
mhm.
So in the 70s in LA, I'm gonna step back in time a little bit because we talked about 80s and the current methods that people use or current preferences that people go for. And it's strange that you should bring up how a lot of people just want to know how to, because I read a survey on YouTube videos recently. And it seems that the most popular videos, if you wanted to meta tag your videos, is to make it how to
Mhm.
do
Yeah.
something, and you get plenty of views. So
Yeah.
there you go. But
But the
in
thing is, I understand that because a lot of times you do. I'm not saying that asking how to do something is not a good idea, because like my car alarm got stuck on my Volkswagen, and the first thing I did was I went to how do I turn off the car alarm?
Yeah, of
Not what
course.
what if I clip this wire? Will it turn off? It was a very different thing.
Of
But
course.
if you want to find out how to cook squash in a microwave oven or something like that, or then how do I is definitely valid, or how do I put
That's
out a
true.
kitchen fire or something.
I
But when
did
it comes
help
to
my mom.
creative
Oh, go
things,
on.
no, when it comes to creative things, what if is what you
Yes.
should be asking.
I do like the way you're thinking. I guess I was just supporting the fact that you are right, Craig, but
How
also
do I?
but you're also right. I managed to fix my mom's cistern by looking at a YouTube video, and change her air conditioner filter by looking at a YouTube video.
And that's great. That's great.
But so back to the 70s, I was going to talk about LA was a happening place, and like several of our guests, you took yourself to LA from Philadelphia, from Pennsylvania, I suppose, the state, and you focused on a technique you would call the synchro-sonic recording, which you
Oh,
eventually
yeah.
presented a paper on at the 1981 AES show in New York. And I do have like a cover. One second, let me find it. The cover of this paper that you presented that was reissued by AES. So the top half of the paper, of the cover of the paper, as you can see, or you will in a second. I was curious if you could describe synchro-sonic recording for our viewers, please.
Yeah, it was actually, yeah, and just as a side note, I actually went to Northern California, not LA. So
Oh,
I
okay.
ended up in
Thank
the
you.
San Francisco area. Not that that matters, but anyway. Okay, so synchrosonic recording it basically predicted the rise of EDM and techno type music and electronically synchronized things. And it was an interesting paper because I was trying to bring people up through how rhythms had progressed over the years. And it had gone from quarter notes to eighth notes as sort of the dominant form. And I said, the next thing is going to be 16th notes. And every time I hear a hi-hat pattern in Reason done with 16 notes, it's
Yeah.
like, yep, okay. But it was about synchronization and cross-modulation of things,
Ah,
modulating each other, which
right.
of course is like the foundation of a lot of dance music.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's synchronized to a clock, and you've got filters that trigger off of things and envelopes that trigger off of things. But the technology to do it was much more primitive. I had to record an actual click track on tape and be able to take that pulse and condition it so I could derive a trigger from it, which would then go into logic circuits to be able to derive pulses, which I could then use to trigger envelopes and things like that.
Yes.
But it was very much about what came true 10 years later or so.
Thank you. So to our viewers, if you have questions for Craig, please put them in the live chat. As you know, there's a lag. So put them in ASAP. So by the time I receive them and Craig gets to respond, he's still around, and we haven't said goodbye to him yet.
Yeah, I noticed that Mike Flavin said Idiocracy with a thumbs up. So Mike, here's a joke you can tell your friends when you tell them about Idiocracy. You tell them it used to be in the comedy section, but now you have to find it under documentaries. I don't know exactly what I'm talking about.
There you go, Mike. And yeah, Mike, he pronounces his last name Flavin, but I call him Flavin just because. That's how I read it. So, Craig, it seems that you produced this, thanks for explaining synchro-sonic recording. So it seems that you produced a string of New Age albums in the 80s, so we're moving forward now to the next decade, and classical projects too. And you won an award for one of your classical projects. What award was this? Do you recall?
Yeah, it was the best CD of the year from in the New Mexico music, whatever it was. It was and it beat out all the pop albums, which I thought was amazing.
Nice, yeah.
It was a vocal a cappella group and that I'd done engineering on, and I should have brought it up here so I could show it to you. It's all cute. Plexiglass thing, but anyway.
Next time.
Next time. But yeah, it's like every year in New Mexico, there's really only one organization that handles all the cultural stuff in New Mexico, and they gave out awards, and I was shocked that there was this, a classical a cappella group got an award, But I did, probably the best known album I worked on was David Arkenstone's Valley in the Clouds, which was in the top 20 New Age albums for 2 years.
Wow.
And then I did a lot of stuff with Spencer Brewer, Brewer's Tingstadt and Rumble, Narada Records, did a lot of Narada. And I had my own album on Narada Records called Forward Motion, which did very well. And it's again an interesting life lesson for people. Is the only reason why I was doing this stuff was because I didn't do New Age. They didn't know how to mic hi-hats. They didn't know how to do strange things with guitars. They didn't know the kind of techniques that rock and roll teaches you. Because that's who I learned from back in the 60s. It was like from Shel Talmy, who produced the Kinks and the Who, and the guys who produced Hendrix, Tony Bon Jovi and Tony Camillo from Motown. All these people who were like Damon Lyon Shaw, Mike the Drums and Tommy. So I learned how to mic drums and that kind of thing. So my background was in those kinds of people, Olympic Studios and Record Plant and Traffic. They were in the same session, all the same sessions we were in, and so it was that kind of a scene. That was the 60s, So when I came in, when I was asked to consult on one New Age project, it was a very bizarre situation because the producer was a video guy. The engineer was a guy who'd worked with Jerry Harrison, Tom Tom Club, and I think he did some Talking Head stuff too. And the producer kept saying things like, "Can you make the cellos more orange?"
More orange?
More orange. And can we have a little blur on? And the poor engineer was like, he knew a friend who knew a friend. He called me and said, "Hey, Craig, can you come translate or something?" So I went there, and I actually was he'd say something like, "Can the cellos be more orange and brown?" I say, "Okay, Dave, maybe about 1.5 dB at 300 hertz." And so he'd do that, and the producer would be like, yeah. So that was a really strange event, but it got my foot in the door because the album was extremely successful. So then I ended up doing more projects for that label. But everything I've ever done in life, I kind of backed into. I mean, so.
It's interesting you're talking about translating between two people. We've had a couple of guests who've talked about being a music translator. The recent one being Craig Curell. He was the synclavier expert on the Michael Jackson tours. And he started working with Michael Jackson on his Bad album. And what Michael wanted him to do initially was to teach him how to use the synclavier. But it was just too much for Michael, and he said, "Well, you do it, and I'll just tell you what I'm feeling like." So for Michael, it was the emotional impact or whatever it was that I was looking for. So he would say to Chris that you are my music translator, my music interpreter. So we asked Craig, how would he then explain to you what he wanted? He would say, well, I want something that makes me feel like this, which is like what you were saying. So I think people like you are few and far between, and your roles are quite important in certain projects between people who are not able to express precisely what it is they need because they're not musically trained, perhaps, or not necessarily musically trained, but trained with the right information, the knowledge with the jargon and the labels that is required to then communicate the message that's necessary. Or it could be so abstract that all you can think of, because even I do sometimes say, I'm not quite feeling happy about when I hear this song. You want something, let's say when the song plays, you want to feel happy, but I'm not feeling happy hearing this song.
Well, a lot of times people don't even know which question to ask, to get what they want. And probably the best example I can give you of that, I think I mentioned it on our test call when I mentioned the harpsichordist, Kathleen McIntosh. So I didn't give you any details, but Kathleen is like, she's like an old lady. She's a gray-haired old lady, and she's like really short, and she plays the harpsichord just beautifully. She's incredibly good at it, but even more importantly, she doesn't play anything like it was a museum piece. That's not how she plays it. She plays it as if Bach came over that day and said, "Hey, Kathy, I got this fantastic harpsichord concerto. Check it out." And she'd play it, and she played with such life, it wasn't, it was just unbelievable. And so I was doing all the engineering and production on this. It was like my baby. And I thought, the traditional way of recording harpsichord is like too polite and too timid, a couple XY mics way in the back as this little harpsichord tinkles, and that's not the way it sounded like to her when she was playing it. When she was playing it was a forceful, big instrument,
Right.
And so I said, "Hey, Kathleen, I want to try an experiment." So I mic'd it like a rock and roll piano miking, and really close mic'd, and it ended up giving her both versions, the traditional miking and the rock and roll miking, but I didn't tell her which was which. I said, "Which would you prefer? Which do you want me to do for the album?" And without a microsecond of hesitation, she wanted the rock and roll one. She said, that's what a harpsichord sounds like. That's what a harpsichord really sounds like. Yeah, do it that way. Now, the only problem was that the editing was horrific because, harpsichords make noise on the note releases. And so with close miking, they were sometimes a little bit too much. And I actually had to go in and reduce individual note releases on a lot of it, but it sounded like an incredibly organic, futuristic DX7 or something, with just this amazing metallic sound. That was just, and to me, that's what a harpsichord really sounds like too. So again, but she wouldn't have known to say that. She wouldn't have known to say, "Hey, Craig, why don't you mic it like a rock and roll piano?" So sometimes people don't know what they want, so you give them a couple of choices. And it's just, interestingly enough, it's the same thing with mastering. I've mastered like hundreds and hundreds of tracks for people. And a lot of artists went through a period where they wanted the loudest master possible. So I would do two versions. I do the loudest master possible, and then I do one that actually had some decent dynamics in it. And I normalized the volumes so that they had the same perceived level. And everybody, almost everybody, I'd say like 95% of the people chose the one with the dynamics. They didn't want the squash ones. And I just explained, all you have to do is turn up the volume control.
Yeah.
And you can actually have dynamics,
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I guess most people out there don't realize what they could have until you show it to them. Which brings us back to your point about the how-to and the what if I.
What if I mic a harpsichord the way you're not supposed to mic it?
Yeah.
It's, there's so many things. It's like I had just done an article about how to make electric guitar sound more acoustic. And somebody wrote in a comment section like, "Well, why don't you just buy an acoustic guitar?" And it's like, well, because I have acoustic guitars, I have electric guitars, I don't have anything that's halfway in between.
Yeah.
And it's a really great sound in some cases, but I found that what really made it good was if I recorded the sound of me hitting the strings and mixed that in with the electric guitar sound.
Yeah.
And then because your ears thought, "Oh, that must be an acoustic guitar, I'm hearing picks hitting strings."
Yeah. Well, there you go. Yeah, I have fun miking things up. When I get a chance, so I do a lot of Foley. I think the most popular one of my Foley works, probably my cover of Michael Jackson's Thriller, which my friend Chris also worked on. He played the guitar parts for me. And then I had a radio DJ friend of mine do the Vincent Price bit at the end. But I did a lot of Foley, and I had fun, slamming doors and crushing egg cartons and all that kind of stuff. But I really do enjoy it. Yeah, I think it's the kid in me. There's a kid in me that won't leave me, so there you go.
Well, you want to play with this stuff. I mean, they say play music,
Well, thank you. So our good friend, we have two good friends, Craig, you and I, who have just popped a couple of questions in the live chat, so I'll attend to the first one. Gary Yelton, he said,
Hi,
hey,
Gary,
Craig. Go on.
No, I was just saying hi, Gary. How's it going? Retired guy. Anyway, yes.
I know, right? And Gary happened to ask a question or make a comment that I was going to broach anyway. And his comment was, tell us about the relationship between PAIA and Polyphony.
Good question. So Polyphony was a newsletter that was sent out to PAIA people. And it was handled by an editor named Marvin Jones, who was another great guy, sort of an unsung hero of musical electronics. And at one point, and I was doing a newsletter at the same time called Device, and it was about effects and guitar things and all that. Well, long story short is Marvin had to leave Oklahoma, and the publisher of Device embezzled money, and I didn't have a newsletter. So I was an editor without a newsletter, and Polyphony was a newsletter without an editor. So Marvin just said, here, you take it over. So I started editing Polyphony, and then I went to John Simonton and I said, we're on the cusp of something big. This was like in the early 80s. I said, all the magazines out there are for guitar players or bassists or keyboard players or recording. I said, there's no magazine for somebody who plays MIDI guitar, drives a synthesizer, and does home recording, So I said, what we need is a horizontal magazine, not a vertical one. And John, of course, was like, yeah, sure, great. He got it. And so we changed Polyphony into Electronic Musician. First two issues were Electronic Musician that were done under Polyphony. And then Mix ended up purchasing it. And, it became like a real magazine. And when I first started with Mix, it had, I think, 2,000 subscribers. And then when I left 5 years later, it had 44,000 subscribers and a bunch of people on the newsstands. I forget how many, but it's about an equal amount on the newsstand. So it was during a time when there was a real need for that kind of thing, that kind of publication. And Gary wrote a lot of the great articles, so he knows what happened in the latter phase of it.
There you go. I did display a picture of a group of Polyphony magazines, and I have now on screen a 1986 issue of Electronic Musician that cost $2.50 US.
Boy, that was expensive.
And for my fans, I just want to display a quick online grab of an issue in 2008, when Mike Levine, who was writing for Electronic Musician, actually interviewed me and my band as well. So Mike Levine, if you're watching, how are you?
Here's a trivia piece about Electronic Musician. I think we were one of the first, if not the first, to do all the file transfers by email, and the typesetting was done there. It was all done through a Radio Shack TRS-80 at 300 baud. It took all night to send the copy for a magazine from where I lived down to Berkeley, and then the typesetters would take it, and they were pushing back like crazy because they thought it was going to put them out of a job, which of course it ended up doing, but that wasn't my plan.
Yeah.
So anyway, but it was great, it was electronic publishing.
Well, there you go. So magazines have, as we've said, migrated online, and with contributions by hardworking writers, bloggers, vloggers, social media influencers, and it's become a free-for-all arena. It's free to set up shop, and there's no paid subscription, most anyway. Do you have any thoughts on this state of reporting and receiving information?
Do I ever?
Uh-oh, did I open a can of worms?
Oh, I don't know if you want to get me started. No, like I've spent a lot of my life disseminating information, so I'm very interested in this concept.
Yeah.
And one of the things that really bothers me is the lack of any kind of vetting, editorially speaking. So if we had someone, if like Gary Yelton wrote an article, we knew that he knew what he was talking about. We knew it was going to be a good article, but we also had editors who could look it over and make sure that, when he meant to say TR-808, it was TR-808, not TS-808 or something else. Everything was like looked over and checked, and maybe put some sidebars in, like, oh, Gary mentioned this. So that's interesting. We should talk to the guy who invented this and see if he has anything to say about it, or something like that. And I'm seeing things like for example, I wrote an article a long time ago called Mixing with Noise. And what I was trying to do was replicate the experience of listening to music driving around in a car, because a lot of people won't sign off on something until they've heard it in a car.
Yeah.
So I decided what it was that the road noise was basically letting you hear what could be heard above the noise, because the ear is very bad at discriminating level differences, So with that, so I wrote a thing about I noticed that mixes I did in Florida when the air conditioning was on were better than ones when it wasn't. And I tried to figure out why. So I wrote this article, and I said, now, just, don't mix with it, but spend a couple, when you're doing in your final stage of the mix, listen to it through noise for a couple minutes and just make sure you're hearing everything you want to hear. Well, that's become so twisted over the years that I tuned into a YouTube channel, and this guy was saying, and it was called the 10 worst pieces of information I've ever heard on the internet. And one of them was mixing with noise. It's all snake oil. There's no such thing. There's no shortcuts. And it's like, dude, that's no. So somewhere between what I wrote and what he said and what he interpreted as what someone said about what they interpreted about what I wrote. So there was no vetting, there was no checking, there was no sourcing. There was no I read it in this Craig Anderton thing. You should ask him whether he's full of crap or not, We used to be able to do that. So finding trusted sources, I think, PreSonus basically has two people who do videos for them. They're like official videos. They're vetted. They work. They know what they're doing. They use the programs. And there's another guy named Marcus Huskins who's self-employed. I think he's self-employed. He lives up in Canada, and he does a lot of Studio One videos, and they're all good. So if someone wants to learn Studio One, I just say look at those 3 videos and don't look at those 3 people, and don't bother looking at anything else. I mean, I'm sure there's other good videos out there, but there's only so many hours in a day. Those 3 people produce a lot of videos, and if you look at them, you'll get what you need. Yeah. But the other thing is that I don't think videos are the be-all and end-all for instruction. I think some things work well with video, like overviews, but some things like step-by-step instructions on how to do things are horrible in videos. You can't rewind and fast forward and find steps and have it open while you have your program open. So what I've come up with a new model of publishing. I mean, this is going to be the self-serving part, but I really believe in it. I've put a lot of time into making this happen. I'm publishing books that are based on a software model. And what I mean by that is that they are PDF download only. You can't buy hard copy. There's no printing, there's no postage, there's no returns, there's no storing them in warehouses, there's no destroying ones that don't work anymore. And they're all constantly being updated, because all it is swapping out a PDF file. So I did a proof of concept with PreSonus on some books for them, and just every now and then a new version would show up, like going from software version 1.1 to 1.2 or 1.3, and people could download it, and they'd get any kind of errors or changes or things in the program that were different or typos, could all be taken care of. And then if it went to a new edition, like with significant amounts of new material and stuff, then people who owned the book could then buy the new edition at half price. So all the revisions were free, but if it was like a significant change. So that way it's always current. That's always been the bugaboo of print, is that it was never current. And the problem with the web is you don't know whether what you're getting is real or not real or fresh or whatever. And by doing books this way, it can be course corrected constantly, so that each revision becomes more accurate, better written. I mean, and I become a better writer. It's like I learn things, and so. Yeah. So I can really see that this way it doesn't have to be books, but it could be like a really good website that instead of, like when I took over Harmony Central, they were saying, oh, content is king. I said, I don't want 3,000 articles. I want 300 articles that are constantly updated. Like there's an article I did called Compressors Demystified in 2005, and it's never been removed. I mean, it just keeps getting changed and updated, and new screenshots and new technologies and all that. And of course, it's great for SEO because it has a zillion views.
Exactly.
So I think that this idea of treating information like software is the way to go. And videos are really hard because it's hard to edit out the stuff that doesn't work and put in new things that do work and create new narration or whatever.
Yes.
So I can see videos when something's introduced. Hey, here's XYZ program, and here's what it does. It has these cool features, and you watch the video and you learn all that. But then when you really want to get deep into it, that's when you need text, I think.
So speaking of hard copies and editable soft copies, I do have pictures of some of your books that you've written through the decades, and the three that I'm displaying now is a home recording for musicians, MIDI for musicians, and the huge book of tips and tricks for Studio One.
The huge book of tips and tricks is one of the electronic ones.
And you've also launched a book division with Sweetwater. This is recently, where your books are in soft copy form, or as we called it, PDF versions. And these will be updated as you previously described with new material as and when it happens.
Yeah, it was launched 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks
with 3
ago.
books.
So it's fresh.
Yeah, 3 books. Yeah, it's very fresh. One's called Max Your Mix, and it deals with mixing in general, the art of mixing, and it's not tied to any particular DAW. Then there's another one called How to Record and Mix Great Guitar Tracks, which is really, people think, oh, I know everything there is to know about guitar, but it goes into such things as like pickup distance and transient control and what's the difference between a nickel wound string and aluminum, and how does that affect it, and how picks affect tone, lots of things like that. But then it goes into really unusual signal processing techniques, how to make amp sims sound good and things like that. So I think that's going to do well. The huge book of Studio One tips and tricks. This is now the second edition of a book that has been out for a while, and I just keep adding tips to it, and it's now up to 492 pages.
Wow.
It's going to get another update in about, I guess about 2 months. It'll be a free update, and it'll have another like 8 tips, 9 tips, something like that. And people can just go ahead and download it and get it.
There you go, everyone. Sweetwater Publishing, I think it's known as Sweetwater Publishing.
Yeah, if you search on Sweetwater Publishing, it shows up.
Yeah.
And they're very inexpensive. I mean, if you think about how much a 492-page book would cost in terms of paper, but it's like $19.95 for almost 500 pages, and you couldn't do that if it wasn't electronic.
Yeah, true. There you go, folks. Go get your copy or your copies. And it was interesting, Craig, when you talked about mixing, or at least listening to a current mix in your car and driving with all the noise and all that. That reminds me of when I was, doing my solo album in Nashville, and my good friend Tom Brislin, who is in the viewing audience. Hi, Tom. Thomas, I call him.
Hi, Tom. Hi, Tom.
We did something similar. So we would drive, in our cars and listen to our CDs. And yes, the noise did make a difference. And the different environment made a difference. So the reason I brought that up is because Tom has a question as well for Craig, and that will be our final question for Craig, I believe, because it's 11:15 or so. So unless there's one last question, which we might be able to fit in, but I think Craig could come back to do a talk on MIDI. I've got some MIDI questions.
Oh,
would that
MIDI.
Would that be
Yeah,
okay?
MIDI,
Let's leave MIDI for another.
But we really need to, because there's a lot of misconceptions going on around about that too.
Yes.
I heard one famous YouTube luminary say, "Oh yeah, they've been promising that for a couple of years. I'll believe it when I see it." Well, the specs are out there. Dude. You can start designing now. There people right now are like making things with MIDI 2.0. So anyway.
I think people just like to provoke, if they can. They want to be able to kind of poke you in the ribs and hope that you go, yo. Yeah, so that's, I guess that's a characteristic of someone who who is ready to say, let's go out there and settle this kind of thing. They just want some action.
I've been doing this series for waves on busting myths for EQ and dynamics and sample rate and stuff like that. And the thing is, as I point out in many of them, it's like, it's not whether it's true or false, because it's like true under these circumstances, but not these. Like, you can have people argue all day, like, I can't hear any difference with 96 kHz played back at 44.1. Oh, I hear a huge difference. Well, they're both right. Because if you're recording sounds in the box that generate lots of harmonics, like soft synths and amp sims, those frequencies can go above the clock rate and cause aliasing. But if you're recording acoustic instruments coming through an interface, they're band limited, you won't have those problems. So they're both right.
There you go.
So there's so much stuff. And cables.
We settled this already.
I mean, if you're playing guitar, the cable matters. If you're playing a line level instrument into a line level mixer, it could be like lamp cables. I mean, anyway. But the question, what was Tom's question?
Okay, here we go. From Tom, he asks, are there any innovations in music technology that you predicted or hoped for that have yet to materialize, that you thought would be here by now?
That is an excellent question. I don't know if Tom, I don't know if you saw the keynote address that I did for the Pro Audio and Radio Summit, but it was about things that are in process and I feel will be happening. And a lot of it touches on collaboration. I thought collaboration would be a little further along by now. But also, well, you're in Nashville, right? Unless you're touring right now. But if you're going to be at Summer NAMM, I'm doing a presentation at 2:30 on 5 technologies that will impact the future of music. 2:30 on Friday. So if you're there, it'd be great to see you. I do think that there's a lot of possibilities. People are afraid of machine learning and AI because it's like engineers are going, oh, I'm going to be out of a job. It reminds me of when samplers first came out and people said, this is going to put musicians out of a job. And I said, who do you think plays samplers? Accountants? It's like, no, musicians play that stuff,
I'm going to quote you.
So like I was thinking about, here's a really good example of how AI and machine learning could help. When you're doing comps on a vocal and you have like maybe 12 comps and tracks and you've got all these little things, it could learn what you like in a comp. It could very easily learn and give you suggestions like, okay, out of these 12 comps, these 2 come closest to the kind of things you've selected in the past. The pitch is constant. It's got a nice vibrato at the end. All the words are distinct. The consonants aren't slurred at the beginning from the compression being too high or whatever, and it could make things more efficient. The other really good example that I saw was Adobe actually did a dialogue replacement thing. So let's suppose I was doing a video to buy King Canine dog food. And the client says, oh, well, actually, we've changed the name to your favorite canine dog food. But it's too late. The person who did the narration was James Earl Jones, and he's off in a cabin in Tahiti enjoying himself or something like that. What this program can do is it can go through and analyze all the speech, come up with the phonemes needed to put in the replacement words, and put in the replacement words. And they're all the same timbre, they're all the same person, they're all the same everything. So, and something like that, I mean, you could probably do it yourself, but it would take you days, So I think there's a lot of possibilities for the future along those lines too. I do think MIDI 2.0, by the way, is going to be huge in terms of controllers and expressiveness. The expressiveness thing is something that is, it's always been one of the big limitations of MIDI. And I'll just leave you with this as a teaser for next time, which is that the MIDI 2.0 spec is as deep as the MIDI 1.0 spec was in 1983. And just like no one back then thought, oh, MIDI, of course, it'll control the fountains at the Bellagio and run Broadway plays. I mean, nobody thought that when they put 2 synthesizers together at an AM show. Yeah. But some of the commands that are in MIDI 2.0 are for things that don't even exist yet. But it's like, but if they existed, wouldn't they want to be able to do something like this? So they're really, they're really thinking, I guess I should say we, because I'm, president of the MIDI Association, all that. But it's them. They do all the work. They're really looking at it like we want this to be around for another 30 or 40 years and still be relevant. And that's one of the reasons it took so long to do. It's very cool. It's very cool.
Yeah, I've got plenty of questions on MIDI for you, but I'll leave that for the MIDI episode. A few comments from our guests. Some viewing guest, viewer known as Authorless, wanted to know if there are any recordings of Anomaly.
There are no known recordings of Anomaly around here. It's totally live performance, you know. But I would say, come to youtube.com/the Craig Anderton and find out what I'm up to these days. I have all my albums there. I post all my music there.
There you go.
And just remember it's the Craig Anderton because somebody already had Craig Anderton, so.
Oh.
I didn't want to be Craig Anderton 4273Z or something. It's some soccer player in England has, and he never uses it, so I don't know.
There you go. And our friend from Australia, MIDI was a wonderful discovery for me in the early 80s. Thanks to Tony as well, I got involved in computer animation in the early 90s. Can't even remember which year it was. And yeah, I use MIDI a lot for interactive, triggering graphics or other MIDIable devices such as synthesizers or computers and so on and so forth. I've had a lot of fun with MIDI, and I'm very protective of MIDI, as I've told you, Craig.
Well, imagine how cool it would be if we had MIDIable up right now and I could play a nice little lick and you could play back at me, you know?
Well, we'll make that happen. We
probably can. We probably can.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. But we'll make that happen for the next episode.
I mean with all the people.
Oh, with all... Yes! Let's do that.
I think we could do that.
Let's do that. So we'll do some planning. I'll talk to you about what's... Actually, no, let's have a look at my schedule right now. Might as well plan now, right? There's no time like now.
March. You're booked up till March of 2023, right?
That would be nice, right? I'm also adjunct lecturing, so I got to fit in marking and teaching with my research for the live stream. Let me see. Nope. We could try sometime in October. Let me just get this correct. October.
What would be really cool is if we could do it live from Synthplex. That would be really something.
We can talk about it. So let's pick a date first. I've got October the 2nd as a potential open date. Shall we just schedule?
I'm trying to remember when Synthplex is, though. Do you know about Synthplex? You know what that is?
Yeah, I do. It's a gathering of folks interested in, yes.
So, again, I'm not sure what the date is because it's been moved a couple times with COVID and all that. But if we could have it around that time, I think it would be so cool.
Yeah, I think Gary mentioned it a couple of years ago. He was going to it, and I was out of the country, I believe. Okay, well, why don't you let me know?
And we'll figure it out.
Yeah, okay. But it's a great idea. Yeah, that will be fun. So let's see. I've got other comments. Mike Brandt, my good friend who is in Eugene, Oregon. Mike will be a guest as well in time to come. He worked on the Petronet project of Todd Rundgren's. But Mike is a cold fusion programming language expert. And Mike's comment is, thanks. I'm very much interested in AI because, Craig, you brought it up. It's completely necessary as we are very short of software developers worldwide. Interesting.
I can see a lot of places where it's really needed. One thing, a really good example is tech support. Vanderbilt University, the very, very great medical college here in Nashville. And they have been putting together AI to diagnose extremely rare genetic disorders so that when a doctor throws up his hands and goes, I have no idea what's going on here, they can go through the database and go, there was a similar outbreak in Jakarta in 2003, and there were 2 cases in France and 1 in Russia with very similar symptoms, and it turned out to be. So I could see tech support doing that. If you had to give your computer details all the time and you say, my program's crashing, and they can say, interesting, everybody with a certain generation of NVIDIA cards with a certain driver have the same problem. get new drivers.
Yeah. Well, there you go, Mike. So, of course, our good friend Tom Brislin says he's back in Jersey and will miss Summer Nam. Hopes to catch you sometime before too long. Our friend Doug.
The invitation remains open.
There you go, Thomas. Doug Llewellyn says, I have the Craig Anderton music tape.
Oh my gosh. Ancient.
Mike Flavin, I use MIDI to switch my guitar amp modular. And
that's an interesting comment too. I saw a Shania Twain concert, and everything was run by two mirrored digital performer stations underneath the stage, and the musicians only had to play. They didn't have to hit foot switches. They didn't have to change presets. They didn't have to do anything. It's they could just play, and I thought this is cool. This is cool.
Yeah, very
cool. But with MIDI 2.0, see, it's bi-directional. So you could say, give me another 8 measures.
Yes, Craig. You are gleefully happy for its birth. And I'm gleefully happy, plenty of questions about it. I hope some of our viewers will attend that one as well with your own MIDI questions. But more comments before I bid you goodbye until the next time. I want to thank Craig too. Mike Flavin wanted to say he was a guitar player, reader going way back. Those columns were terrific. Tony Fowler again from Melbourne, Australia. Great articles of yours on Sweetwater site, and thanks for a great talk, Craig. Of course, Mike Brandt, cold fusion expert, says yes, in medicine, radiology is a classic use case. So, everyone, if you have no other questions, I shall relieve Craig until the next time.
Well, I'd really like to thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. I'm, as you know, I'm really into this stuff. I really am. And if there's anything if there's anything I can do that can maybe help inspire people or give them a little more confidence in their own desires to go off in new directions and things like that. I mean, I think I'm a really good example of how you can do everything wrong and still end up okay.
Well, Craig, incidentally, I took a screenshot of your website where you have a library of tips and tricks.
Over 200 articles.
So there you go, everyone. If you're interested, go over and take a look. I'm sure Craig would be most delighted, gleefully delighted.
It's easy to find. It's craiganderton.org.
Yes, I've got the URL on top of the screenshot, as you can see.
Oh, yeah, there we go. Yep. 200 articles. And they get revised.
And they get revised. I'll have to bookmark this and show this to my students as well. So, Craig will talk about, I'm just wondering if we do a group kind of MIDI jam on the day of Synthplex, or one of the days during Synthplex. I wonder perhaps if I should do your MIDI chat on that same day.
That would be great. I don't know if it can be a jam situation. I think at the moment it's still person to person. I don't think we could have like everybody playing, but we could have everybody listening in to you playing, for example. Okay. You could decide to play your keyboards, and we could all trigger tone generators at our end.
Okay, well, let's talk about that then. So you let me know what you're thinking, and I'll let you know what I think we could do.
Okay, great. I really appreciate it. Thanks again for the opportunity.
Well, we want to thank you for your time you spent with us. We've totally and utterly enjoyed having you really on this live stream, and I hope you had a fun time too.
Yeah.
And we can only wish you exciting projects ahead, and of course to stay safe. But I'm sure you've been staying safe. And so take care, Craig, and thanks again. So everyone's wishing you all the best, and thank you for your time spent. Oh, Doug came back with the dates for Synthplex. It's October 28th to 31st.
Okay, pick one of those. And don't tell me you're out of the country or something.
I hope not. I think I'll be marking at that point. Since I stream on a Saturday, it might be a good thing if we could pick a Saturday.
Okay,
What
let's
do you
see.
think?
Should I look at my calendar here?
Yeah.
Let's
Everyone,
see.
thanks so much. Oh, while you're looking, our good friend Tony Fowler reminded me because I was mentored by Jeff Pressing when I was working on interactive MIDI control systems, interactive multimedia performance systems. And Tony said Jeff Pressing was a pioneer of MIDI control and performance. Yes, I don't know if you recall Jeff Pressing, Craig.
It doesn't ring a bell, but there, I wish I knew more people. I wish I had more time to spend with people too.
Jeff was teaching at Berkeley at one point, and also he wrote a monthly column in Keyboard magazine in the 80s, I believe, and he was author of the definitive book on extended synth techniques. Tony, correct me if I'm wrong. But
I can't get into my calendar here. Anyway.
Oh, what?
It's got to be there somewhere. Come on, I unlocked it and everything. Oh well.
But
No,
while you continue to try and unlock the
here we
calendar.
go. Okay, tell it not to set time automatically. Okay, October 28th, 29th, and 30th. Yeah, we can do it on the 30th then.
30th?
That's Saturday.
Okay, let me lock this in. Craig at Synthplex. Gary, are you still there? Because Gary was saying earlier on that he could make the 2nd of October, which is fine because we moved it to the 30th. Is that? Yeah, let me just complete typing this in. The 30th of October. Do you have a particular time? Don't make it like 6 a.m. in my morning. But
It's
if
the
it
price you pay. No, I don't know. That's first of all, I'm going to have to ask if the organizers want to do it, because I think what would be really cool would be if it could be like an actual session where we had you on a screen and we had, a live audience and everything. It wasn't just you and me with a laptop in a hotel or something.
Yeah, let me know.
So we need to fit into what they're doing as well.
Okay.
But probably, I mean, if this is a time that works for you, maybe it might be like an after party show thing or something,
Okay. Just doing a quick check. 30th. Okay.
Yeah, I know what you mean about 6 in the morning. I rarely stay up that late myself.
I'm just looking at my teaching schedule as well. Semester 2 begins on the 18th, but if I can prepare ahead of time, I should be good. So I tend to use soft synths with Main Stage or Logic Pro. So I will work with that. I've done several templates for, improvisational type events or performances, or just relaxed, casual type setups. So I could work on one of those kind of things. But we'll talk about that.
Yeah, and the other thing is we can probably get, some people from the MIDI Association involved too. Some other designers and people who know more than I do.
Sounds good.
That's not hard to do, believe me. When it comes, I'm amazed. I look over the, what's going on with the technical standards board, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's like they're just doing these amazing things, and it's like, how do you do this?
Yeah.
Anyway.
So
But
maybe we should fit in a quick chat on MIDI and MIDI 2 and MIDIable before that.
Like October 2nd.
Yeah, what do you think?
Sure, we can tease the big event.
That's what I thought.
And I'll have new books out by then.
So let me just put this in October 2nd. Why do I keep being sent to... of course. All right. So shall I schedule a lesson for October the 2nd to talk on MIDI? I'm going to do that now if it's A-okay with you.
Well, isn't it perfect that MIDI 2.0 would be on the 2nd of October?
Ha, ha, ha. That's right. It's fate.
How prophetic.
Yeah, exactly. All right, that's done. So I'll see you on October the 2nd to talk
Yeah.
about MIDI, but I will get in touch with you a couple of weeks before just to make sure the tech stuff's still A-okay and chat about what we want to chat about.
Yeah,
If that's
this was okay, right? I mean, it was usable.
Yes, it worked
So,
really well.
we're good.
Thanks, Craig.
Okay.
Okay,
Well, thanks
everybody.
again.
It looks like a few of us are attending already. Gary Yelton says that works for me.
Great.
Gary Mayulo from Frederick, Maryland, who is our ambassador for music and chat, he's going to be there. Mike Flevin's going to be there. Yes. If all of you will be there, it will make me most happy. And Craig too, I believe. So
Well, I
spread the
can
word.
too. You know, I can mention it too. We can get it in the MIDI Association newsletter and stuff too. So,
Cool bananas. Okay, Craig, I shall let you be.
well, thanks again, and thanks to everybody who participated and is watching it and all that. I know you have other things you can do on a Saturday night. So,
I hear you. Yes, likewise from me. So, everyone, let's thank Craig. There's your applause sound
you.
effect.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
take care, Craig. I'll speak
All
to you
right.
soon.
Good
Okay,
night.
bye.
Okay.
Sleep well.
Oh, I will.
Okie dokie, folks. That was fun. It was so nice to see you guys and my good friends and familiar faces as well. It means a lot to me that you're there supporting me and joining me in the fun. Now, next week's guest is still to be confirmed. I have a few people in mind. It gets harder and harder to confirm them as, COVID measures are lifted because people want to be outdoors instead of indoors. But I always find someone just as fun for my next guest anyway. So I hope you come back to join me in 2 weeks, or aka a fortnight. You've been wonderful, folks. I've had a please subscribe to my channel here, but I'm gonna have a thank you instead. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. And my music is available from Bandcamp, as you can see. Thanks so much for being such wonderful viewers. For Craig, what was I going to say? Yeah, when you tune to my live stream in a fortnight's time, please bring your friends. Thank you very much. Okay, then I shan't say much more, but I'll stick around for another minute or two as the credits roll in the outro in case you have any more questions or comments. But you've been wonderful as per usual. But please bring your friends next time. The more the merrier, and encourage them to say hi in the live chat. That way we know who you are and we can interact with you. That's the fun bit of it. Okie dokie, Smokey. Good night, everyone, and good morning or good afternoon if you're in Singapore or Australia. And thanks, Tony, for popping by if you're still there. Bye, all of y'all. Take care till next time.